Today I will be talking about the platypus, also known as Orthonychithanathus. So what is a platypus? Orthonychus anathus is a duck-billed, web-footed mammal with an otter body native to only Australia and Tasmania. It also has a beaver-like tail. So the kingdom that the platypus belongs to is Animalia, it being an animal. The phylum is Chordata. The class is Mammalia. The order is Montramata, meaning it lays eggs and is a mammal. The family is Orthocyanate, and the genus is Orthocycus, and the species is Orthocycus anatus. So the main diet of the platypus is fish and crayfish, as it is semi-aquatic. It eating fish and crayfish makes it carnivorous. It's also a crepuscular, which means that it is active at dawn and dusk. And for habitat, it burrows around 20 meters deep and lays its eggs underground as well. Some important characteristics for the platypus are it's a mammal, it's a montromere, which means it's a mammal that lays eggs, it's semi-aquatic, it's venomous, and it's electroceptation, which means that its bill emits electrical pulses which it can use to hunt and find food. So just a quick diagram to show the platypus and all of its features. The tail is hard and used for defense. It has webbed feet and venomous rear claws. This is mainly used for mating and protection. A double layered coat to keep it warm when the weather gets a little bit cooler. Eyesight is okay, but it's not used for hunting at all because of the electro pulses in the bill that are used to find prey. So the evolution of the platypus can be seen over 315 million years ago, with the synapse through theropods all the way into protheropod mammals. So, as you can see in this chart, the platypus hasn't really evolved that much for 315 million years. As we look, it only has one living relative, and that relative would be the echidna. So the echidna is a montromere as well, which means it lays eggs. And because they're both montromeres, they have the same taxonomy or classification. So, also known as a spiky anteater, it mostly eats ants and invertebrates like grubs, which is different from the platypus. An evolution that it started eating because of its size. Also similar biogeography with the platypus, as it lives in Australia as well. But the platypus and echidna have adapted to lay eggs due to the lacking of the placenta, which most other mammals have besides marsupials. So basically, the echidna and the platypus have both adapted to lay eggs because they lack a placenta, which is an important organ in the human body and most other mammal bodies, which is kind of like a life support machine for the baby, which allows waste and food and other necessities in the womb for the baby to live there for a long enough time for it to develop properly. So because they lack this, they needed to adapt a new way to deliver their offspring. So a similarity between the echidna and the platypus is they both have kind of a nosed/pointed bill. These are analog structures because the echidna evolved for land and the platypus evolved for water. As you can see, they kind of have a similar evolution with the nose. Like they both evolved specifically to what they eat, but they evolved differently as the platypus is for water and the echidna is for land. So next,
Stepharodon, or the Stepharogalani, is a platypus-like montromere from the early Cretaceous period of Australia. Now, the Stepharodon is extinct and did belong to the montromere family, meaning it was a mammal that laid eggs. It is thought to be one of the oldest mammals ever discovered. It is from the early Mesozoic era. What sets this mammal apart from the platypus is its duck bill, which is skinnier and has molar teeth instead of like one central tooth in the platypus, and its feet are not webbed, meaning it's not ideal for swimming, and also its tail isn't as wide, making it not as good for swimming as well. So all of these attributes suggest that the platypus had to adapt in order to be good in water, and that its ancestors did not swim. So just to recap, the Stepharodon has the same biogeography as the platypus. The taxonomy, both being montromere, makes them the same, and they both adapted. The Stepharodon adapted for land use, and the platypus adapted for water. So the next extinct ancestor I'll be talking about is Obdurana, or the Obdurana dixicine. So this was a large spoon-billed platypus, very similar to the platypus that we know today. The only key differences were it was much bigger, and its teeth were different. It had molars as well, just like the previous platypus species that we talked about. And based off what we know about the teeth, it ate mostly frogs, fish, and smaller vertebrates. It was also semi-aquatic, having webbed feet and a large tail. This species is thought to go all the way back to the Gowanen, which is a supercontinent that broke off from Pangaea. Unlike living platypuses, these fossils had functional molars, meaning that it also was probably an omnivore eating fish and some plants. So just to recap, it has the same biogeography coming from Australia, same taxonomy, it being a Montremer. Adaptations, so the platypus shrunk in size from this ancestor, and its teeth changed in order to hunt more specifically for fish and crayfish, making it fully carnivorous. So its homologous appearance and structures, basically the platypus looks almost exactly the same as this, except shrunken down, and a little bit different bill for the teeth. And the structures are, it has very similar legs to the Obduron, because they're the same shape. The previous two are the only known ancestors of the platypus, so in order to fulfill the required 5, I needed 2 more. Now, I had to go into marsupials, because they're the only other mammal lacking the placenta. And I ended up finding an article stating that 88 base pairs located on some of the platypus genes are also found in mammals, meaning that they actually have similar genes, making them much closer related than previously thought. So, I'll be continuing on with marsupials. So just to continue with the history of marsupials and montremers, as you can see in this chart, marsupials and montremers were on the same evolutionary path up until about 65.6 million years ago, where a common ancestor split, and one ancestor decided that the best way to develop their young was through a pouch, and the montremers decided that the best way to raise their young was through eggs. So, another quick snippet, you might be wondering why all these animals are maybe coming from Australia, or why there's so much biodiversity in Australia. And that would be because Australia is an adaptive radiation zone, meaning that it's a large island which is rich in resources and far away from everywhere, making it a perfect spot for evolution to take place on a large scale and create many new diverse animals and subsections of animals. So now I'll be talking about wombats, a member of the marsupial family. So wombats are small, stocky animals, the largest known burrowing animals in fact, and they get their ability to dig from the common shared ancestor of the platypus. Also from their thick, small forelimbs that have great ability to move lots of dirt. So, them being marsupials, they have a pouch to carry their young. Now, a pouch is a great alternative to a placenta because it allows the baby to develop in the pouch and get all nutrients through a nipple giving the young milk. So they have a kind of a homologous structure shared with the platypus, and that'd be their leg. They have very similar legs, being that they're both kind of short, stocky animals and that they both dig a lot. So wombats also share the same biogeography with platypuses because they both live in Australia. So the next marsupial I'll talk about is the koala, also known as Phascoloritis centrius. So the koala is a herbivore that eats exclusively eucalyptus leaves. It also lives in Australia with the platypus, making them have the same biogeography. They have a vestigial structure, and that would be the tail and nose. So the tail is no longer used for climbing like it once was, because the paws and claws adapted to climb trees better, and they just didn't need the tail anymore. The nose used to be used for predators, but because Australia doesn't really have as many large predators as it once was, it doesn't need it to stop predators. Or food, because they live in their food source, which is the eucalyptus trees. So, them being marsupials, they also have a pouch for their young, where they can let their young develop and drink milk from the teat inside the pouch. So, they also have an ancestor known as Nicomalaika graechan. Sorry if I mispronounced that. And it is just a much larger koala, which has very similar structures to the platypus, and climbs trees and is brown. So the koala does not really have much in common with the platypus itself, besides biogeography and the shared 88 gene sequence.
So, to conclude, the platypus is a very old animal, and its relatives have been on Earth for around 150 million years ago or older. And through that course of 150 million years, it has evolved very little, and yes, marsupials have evolved more, but they're not really considered the same because they're a branch off of the platypus. There are very few montremers left on Earth, and that is why the platypus has evolved only for food and through genetic variation. The platypus is very rare and only found in Tasmania and Australia, and that is why I chose it for this project, because I wanted to learn how an animal that has such little relatives and resources can survive for so long. Thank you.